Well, Michelle Grattan, good morning.
Good morning.
If you can bring yourself, I'd like to talk about two taxes and an excise duty this morning. First, the carbon tax. Factum est, it is done, meaning that a country with one of the highest levels of emissions per head of population has been the first to repeal a measure designed to reduce the emissions. And yet an opinion poll suggests that opinion is actually spread over emissions trading and carbon tax and so on. So my question to you is, the Prime Minister may feel good at the moment about it all, but has he actually done himself any good?
Well, I think he's reversed what was a good policy, and that doesn't do Australia any good in the longer term. It was a very hard-fought policy. It took scalps. It caused an immense amount of political pain, and to step back from that, I think, is really bad. Usually when economic reforms are brought in by one side or other of politics, they do stay, the GST being, of course, a notable example, but in this case we've taken a step backwards. Now that's from the nation's point of view. As for the Prime Minister himself, well, he's delivered on a promise. I think that people will welcome that. He did make this the centre of his campaign over a very long period to try and wrest the Prime Ministership. So that achievement is quite important. I think it's a morale boost to the coalition. But having said that, voters move on very quickly. And where is their thinking now? I think it'll be on the budget, on the nasties in the budget. A lot of those are not through the Parliament. There's going to be an immense amount of discussion about them in the next couple of months. And so whether the carbon victory really translates into support into the longer term is much more problematic.
Now, I'll come to the budget in a moment, but can I ask you, Bill Shorten has said that he will go to the next election with an emissions trading scheme of some kind. I assume his colleagues knew that he was going to say this, but why say it now?
Well, he had to say something. He had to say either we'll go back and look at our policy again and leave a sort of limbo, and I think that would make him vulnerable. It would leave him open to accusations that he'd fought the repeal of the carbon tax, but then once it was done, he was trying to just get away from the whole concept of a carbon price. So I think tactically it's quite sensible to say we've believed in this, we continue to believe in it, we'll fight for it at the next election. That's not to say he won't take a hit over this, because obviously carbon pricing, while people are more amenable to it perhaps than they were a year or two ago, is still not the flavour of the month. So there'll be a bit of pain, but Labor is seen to be standing for something and not doing U-turns on something that it said was so important.
Thank you. The mining tax. It seems now the numbers are there to repeal it, but only with strings attached to do with the social programs that were to be funded by the mining tax, and the government has said that it's just not going to have those programs funded. Clive Palmer overnight has apparently said that there should be a mini budget and the country should go back to the polls. So look into your crystal ball, Michelle, what happens next?
What happens immediately, I think, is that the House of Representatives, which is sitting today, will refuse to accept those expensive amendments that the Senate passed very late last night. And so while the repeal bill is through, it will be sent back again to the Senate with those amendments deleted. So in that sense it's not through. And it'll sit there for more than a month while Parliament is in recess and everyone continues to think, and that stalemate persists. What happens when the House comes back, who knows? But I think that Clive Palmer doesn't seem in the mood to retreat, so perhaps that mining tax just isn't repealed for quite some time.
Thanks. And then the fuel excise indexation issue. Christine Milne, the leader of the Greens, has said that they won't support the indexing of it, in other words, the increase in it, and yet her rank and file presumably believe that that's the kind of thing that ought to be increased. There have been rumblings about her leadership. Is she secure at the moment, do you think?
I think she's secure at the moment, but in the longer term, I think that there are question marks over her and whether the party would consider her the best person to go into the election. But for the moment, that's not on the agenda. As for the fuel issue, this has been Greens' policy for a long time to restore indexation. It obviously fits in with their carbon policy generally. But the party decided no, it was going to oppose this after initial indications that it might go along with it. And there's a meeting of the National Council of the Greens this weekend. I think there'll be a lively discussion. The feeling seems to be that they won't seek to have it reversed in any formal sense, because that would be two backflips and that would be a bad look in itself. But nevertheless, it is an example where the Greens have put politics, not wanting to give Tony Abbott a win, above good policy and their own priorities and principles.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Latin sound bites seem to be in fashion at the moment, so I'll close by thanking you and saying nil desperandum, never despair.
Well, the government would be glad to hear that sort of motto and is perhaps trying to adopt it.